What's up guys, it's the Depressed Panda here, and today I am back in Wargame Dragon. So, recently I've been playing a lot more of this game, and I've noticed that my friends have certain issues with it that sort of stop them from enjoying it as much as you normally would. So I've addressed some of those problems in one of my recent videos, the infantry tutorial, which sort of just teaches you how to use your infantry to set up defensive positions and stuff like that. So go check that out. The link should pop up any second. And today I'm going to be addressing another one of those issues that I found, and that is your deck. So what I've noticed is that a lot of my friends don't actually bother building their decks, especially if you just start out. Obviously you can play with a starter deck because you don't really know what you're doing. But I find that if you build your own deck and really get to know that deck, you will do a lot better than someone who just uses a Blue 4 deck or just other people's decks, because you can't export and import and it's ridiculous, right? So we're just going to go ahead and make a deck. Let's call it Pandas deck. Excuse my typing there. We're just going to keep it Blue 4. I'm not going to use any coalitions yet, just because you know, that's up to anyone, and I'm not going to use Israel or the Netherlands because obviously they are DLCs. So I'm just going to keep it very simple. I'm going to use the United States of America. We're not going to use a type, but I will briefly touch those in a second. So you've got your motorized, armored, support, marines, mechanized, and airborne. Now each of these, here, let's just click on the airborne. You'll see that they are restrained to certain types. So, for example, you won't get as many tanks as, for example, an armored division. You won't get the range of tanks, you won't get be able to use as many, they'll be more expensive, they won't be as good, that sort of thing. But as you can see, you'll get better infantry helo planes, you'll get cheaper versions, you'll get more of each, so you can field a lot more, they'll be cheaper, and pretty much just better than most of the others. Okay, so we're not going to use a type, we're not going to use a certain era either, so we're just going to stick to the all, no bonus, just the plain deck. Alright, so now we're in the deck building screen. So let's start off by just talking about this. So the cost, at the top here you've got activation points, which basically just let you buy units to put in your deck, and we'll touch on that in a second. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to logistics. Right. So in logistics, as you can see on the left there, you've got all your logistics units. Now other decks will have different variations. An armored deck will have a lot more tanks and no helicopters, that sort of thing. So it's really up to how you want to play it, where you want to take your deck. But we're just building a really simple all-rounder deck right now. So the way I like to use my logistics is I like to buy one ground unit, like a cheap jeep. Oh god, I can't talk. Just get a jeep, right? Double click it, it's just a jeep, it'll drive there, it'll sit there, it'll do nothing, it's a jeep, right? Now, to quickly get to places and capture them, I like to use helicopters. So what I like to do is I like to get a helicopter as well. So you've got one unit that can get to empty sectors really quickly at the start of matches, or like ones that are across the water, that sort of thing. That's what you got your Huey here for. And then you've got your jeep, obviously, to get to closer places, hide them in jungles, any of that sort of stuff, right? You've got 3 more slots here. Now, if you want to use an Abrams or something, that's up to you. They do have armor, they can defend themselves, unlike the jeeps and stuff. But this is just a simple deck, and we won't really have to worry about that. Now, one thing you want to do is get an FOB. Now, we're not going to get a picture of an FOB, but it's a forward operating base. It's just a giant square filled with ammo and supplies that you can just plonk down at the start of the game, and you can go back and get supplies there. Now you're going to need supplies because if you look on the right there where it says fuel, all your units have fuel and ammo, and they do need to be resupplied, otherwise they'll just end up getting killed or end up not being able to move anymore. So in order to do that, get an FOB and some supply units. So the way I like to run supplies is I like to get one supply helicopter. For in this case, the Stallion can carry more, but I prefer the Chinooks because there's more of them, so I can get 4 Chinooks. So let's go ahead and get a Chinook. So what what they'll do is they'll just fly back and forth and carry supplies to units out in the field quickly. Now if you've got things like artillery, which I'll touch on later, you want trucks, because you can just move them short distances and they can carry a lot of stuff. So we'll get the Hemmets. Hemtts, I don't know how to pronounce them. They do look quite cool as well. So just to recap logistics, you want one flying supply unit, you want one ground supply unit, you want an FOB, you want a flying command unit and a ground command unit. That's just the very basic, right? That'll get all the jobs done. Okay, there's nothing here that can't be done with the stuff you have here. Alright, let's move on to infantry. And already, I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, there's a lot of them. Why is there so many of the same guys? Why is there so many stingers? And yes, we'll get to that in a second. It does look messy, but trust me, it all makes sense when you really think about it. So let's start off with the very basic rifleman, right? So as you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots. So that's enough to get everything done. Alright. So if we hover over these guys, these are just your bog standard US Marines and US Marines from the 90s, right? So we're just going to compare these guys. So the normal US Marines carry. Okay, I should add. The criteria for my type of normal infantry is their anti-tank capabilities. Because the guns are nice and all, but they're not going to stop a tank, and tanks are just so easy to use in this game that if you can't stop a tank, you're useless at all. You're just completely useless. So these guys have an 84, which has a range of 700 meters, which is good, and an AP power of 19, which will kill most tanks, except really heavy tanks. So let's have a look at the riflemen. They've also got an 84. Actually, they both have 84s. Oh, okay. So what I've done here is they're actually the same unit. These guys and these guys are actually the same unit. The only difference is, what I'll get to in a second, is if you mouse down below them, these are the transports they come in. So you'll see that these guys cost different amounts because they come in different transports. So these guys will be in a Black Hawk, these guys will be in a Bradley, these guys will be in an M113, these guys are in a Humvee. So they all have different defensive and offensive capabilities that come with them. So these are your normal riflemen, MBT laws, and these are light riflemen, which are, well, riflemen that are light. So we'll go ahead and get some US Marines, and the question is, which one do we want? We definitely want the 90s, because as you can see, they've got a better AP power, which means they can stop better tanks. So we can either get flying ones, so they can be deployed quickly around the battlefield, but they also cost a lot more, and the odds of them getting shot down by AA that you haven't spotted are high, which isn't always the best. So I'm just going to look here. So this guy has better weapons and only costs 10 more. So we're going to go ahead and get one of these. So that, as you can see here, gives us 15 units. So we've got 15 units of these Marines. That'll do for now. So these are just your bog standard grunts. They don't do anything special. They're just there to hold your points. And I won't go so much into the infantry tactics. You guys can check out my last tutorial video, and that'll go into what you can do with each type of infantry. So we're going to go ahead and move to the long-range anti-tank, which is probably one of my favourite units. Unfortunately, if you guys can see here, there isn't actually any around. So these red guys here, you can see because they've got a guy with an AT launcher. Those are dedicated anti-tank teams. So here we've got a small team. Unfortunately, their longest range is 875 meters, which really is not good at all when it comes to defending against tanks. So in this case, I'm not going to grab one. In fact, I'm just going to grab a second unit of US Marines, just because they have roughly the same power and don't have much less range, but they have a lot more weapons, they have a lot more people, and just in general, it's better in this case. So now we're going to want to look at the AA, and boy, there is a lot. The easiest way to compare them is just to have a look at them. Now, when it comes to AA infantry, what you want to look for is their range, the helicopter range and the airplane range, and the accuracy. Those are the three most important factors. Don't worry about the rest. Those three factors are what's going to set them apart from the rest. So we're going to click on these guys. So already, because I've clicked these guys here, they come with a Bradley. So that brings in towed missiles and a Bushmaster cannon, which is amazing. It's a great support unit. So in this video I'm not going to go in to unit specifics, I'm just really going to go into the deck building aspect. So the Stinger here has 50% accuracy, whereas the Red Eye has 35. I'm just going to click back and forth. So I'm going to mouse over one, so you'll see it change on the right there. They have the same range, the same range for both airplanes and helicopters. However, the Stinger's accuracy is a lot higher. As you can see, it's 50 instead of 30. The HE power is 5 instead of 3, and suppression is 200, and the reload time is the same. So basically, these two units are exactly the same, only the Stinger is better. So now we're going to look at the Stinger C, which is the same as the Stinger A, only it has 70% accuracy instead of 50. Now, as you'll see, the price keeps going up. So these guys cost 35, whereas these guys cost 45. But it is definitely worth getting these Stingers. So what we want, Stingers aren't meant to go into combat. So what you want to do is have them really cheap, like a really cheap unit. So these guys, I can get away with 25. So we're going to go ahead and grab one of those. You've got 7 units of Stingers. Alright, now, onto the fun bit, the Special Forces. We've only got Delta Force, but as I showed you in my last video, these guys can kick ass. They have great AT. They have Carl Gustav M2s, which are 84mm heat rockets, which can be fired against ground targets as well. So they can be fired against infantry as well as tanks, and they have an AP power of 18. So they're very nice. So what you want to do with these guys is, even though they can be deployed in Humvees, you definitely want to have them deploy in a helicopter. The reason that is we have our logistics helicopter. Now, if you have Special Forces units that can be deployed with those command units, you can race up to the halfway mark into a sector and deploy 2 Special Forces units to secure the area while your command chopper lands, and then you've already got a pretty well secured area, which you can then reinforce with your better units like your US Marines that are going to be a lot slower, for example. So these are quick response units. Now, we've got 4 infantry units out of 5. Now you can either get a dedicated anti-infantry unit, which will have flamethrowers or something like that, or you can just go ahead and get another of your Delta Force units, because they are amazing. So in this case, these guys have the M202 Flash, which I'm not actually a fan of. It's basically a napalm rocket launcher, and the accuracy is not well, so I prefer to just get another group of Delta Force. Alright, so that does it for the infantry. So I'm just going to recap. We've got 2 bog standard infantry units, which should just have, you know, an LSW, M16s, and an AT gun. You've got your Stingers, and you've got your Special Forces. Alright, so that does it for infantry. We're going to move on to support. Now, first thing you want to do is check out all your anti-air, because that's going to be your most important. So here we have, let me just have a look. So we've got the Avenger, which is often used by the Marine Corps, I think, which is basically just a little Humvee with 8 Stinger missiles. Now, the range on this is not great compared to other AA. In fact, it's atrocious compared to other AA. But it's mobile, it's cheap, and it'll do the job against helicopters pretty damn well. The accuracy is nice. And yeah, so it's a cheap thing, but I won't actually use it for this deck. Let's move on to the Vulcan. So you'll see that the range isn't that great either, but it's a lot cheaper than the Avenger, and it will tear helicopters to shreds within seconds. I've seen it used very well, but again, I'm not going to go on about all these guys. So this is a radar round. So this uses radar, which significantly increases. Let me show you here. So this is the range. So 2625 and 2450. That's the range of this thing. Now if you go back to this, you'll see that the range dramatically decreases on the airplanes because it does not use radar. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to stick to the missiles. So what you want to do is get 1 infrared unit. So these guys, even if you just want to get the Avenger, I prefer to use the chaparrals or something, just because they're, for example, this one is amphibious, as you can see down here, so it can go across water. So we're going to go ahead and grab one of these. So what these guys are good for is placing them near the buildings. They're good against helicopters. As you can see, the range on helicopters is quite nice, the accuracy is nice, so yeah, this is great against helicopters. Now, we're going into the radar missiles. So as you can see, compared to the last one, the range on the airplanes to the right is ridiculous. It's twice as big, at least. And obviously the better ones have increased range. So when it comes to radar missiles, you want the one that has the biggest range, because they are just huge area denial objects, basically, for aircraft. So if you put one of these Patriots in a kilometer radius around a town, no aircraft will get near it, because it will be shot out of the sky before it can even reach its target. So we're going to go ahead and get one of these Patriots, just because they're awesome. So far I've got one infrared unit to ward off helicopters, and one radar unit to ward off aircraft. But as you can see, I've only got two anti-radar units, two radar missile units, which isn't really a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and get one of these Hawks, which means I got 6 radar units and 4 non-radar units. So that's enough for the AA. If you want now, you can get things like rocket launchers. You get artillery pieces. Their range is ridiculous, and they will destroy everything. Or you can get normal artillery guns. The bigger the guns, the better. So I like to play with artillery. I definitely like artillery, especially the M10s. Their range is amazing. Their power is amazing. So I usually get one of these, and we're going to leave the fifth slot empty, just because we need to save on points, because we've got a long way to go, and I want to put more points into air and helicopter units, just because that's just how I prefer to play the game. Alright, now this is probably the most amazing bit, the tanks. So we're just going to go right in. Heavy Abrams. Now, the most important things when you're looking at your tanks is definitely the armor. Don't worry so much about the armament. You want to look at what kind of millimeter rounds it's firing. 120 is plenty. You want to look at its AP power and its armor. So this thing has a lot of front armor. So if it gets hit from the front, nothing will go through that has an AP power of less than 22. So this thing could kill itself. I don't know why it would. But let's have a look here. So an M60, this thing would not be able to destroy this Abrams from the front, because it just cannot penetrate that armor. This thing couldn't penetrate it either, as you can see here. Super M60 couldn't do it, so there's a lot of good stuff here. So we're going to go ahead and get one of these. We can only get 2 of them, and they are quite expensive, so they want to be protected all the time. But yeah, we'll go into that. So you want 1, maybe 2 super heavy tanks that can just annihilate things, right? So I'm going to get these 2 Abrams. And then you want your, I say throwaway tanks, they're not throwaway tanks, but you want cheap tanks that you can pump out at mass to sort of overwhelm an area. So I'm going to get 2 of these Abrams, right? So I've got, I don't know, I can't math, sorry, 26. We've got 26 cheap Abrams that are still quite strong. They are still quite strong, don't get me wrong. You can of course get light tanks, medium tanks, because a lot of them do have missiles, which is really handy. For example, the Sheridan is pretty cool. But once again, we're going to leave the 5th slot open, because we want to save some points for the later units. So we come to our recon units. Again, I've touched on what these units do and how to use them in my last video, so I won't really go on about that. So I usually like to run at least 1 helicopter, right? So in this case, the Kiowa, I can't really pronounce that. This one's pretty cool because it has Hellfires. Not a lot of recon units are that well armed, especially the helicopters. But as you can see, it costs 95 points, which is a lot. So I'm going to get the cheaper Kiowa. So let's add that. There we go. Because these units aren't meant to fight. They're just meant to sit out of the combat zone to observe everything. So also I usually like to get 1 air and 1 ground unit, whether that's a Jeep or a bit of infantry. So in this case we'll get 1 unit of infantry. You can just deploy them in a forest and have them watch the entrance, like I showed you in the last video. So now we're moving on to vehicles. A lot of these vehicles are support vehicles. So we've got a lot of, you'll see that we have a lot of, we can actually zoom in. So for example, anti-tank Humvees. So these guys have no armor, they'll be destroyed by everything. They have an AP power of 25, so they could destroy one of these 180 point tanks from the front if it landed a proper hit. So that's definitely something to watch out for. We've got flamethrowers. So this is a flamethrower tank which will absolutely destroy infantry. So what I usually like to run with is something like an LAVAT, just because you can park them around the place and they can just rain down fire to hold choke points, all sorts of stuff. Or something like a combat, which can double up as anti-air, as you can see, up to 1500 meters. It can fire on helicopters with 45mm rounds, which is pretty damn good. So we're going to get one of these and just leave it for now, because we want to get the more important units like aircraft and helicopters, which are really expensive. So let's go over to helicopters. Now, excuse me. Now, helicopter criteria, you want to look for armament. Definitely look for armament. So you'll notice there's a lot of red here, which means this unit probably isn't the best, and it looks kind of weird too now that I'm looking at it. A Seahawk, this is nice because it's got a nice anti-tank armament, but again, it doesn't have many. It has 4 Hellfire missiles, and that's it. That's all it can do. Oh, this is a good point. Helicopters with anti-air capabilities are very rare. You'll see a lot of Apaches, for example. They can fire on other helicopters with their cannons, but at very close range. So this guy has a range of 1500 on helicopters, whereas this guy can fire at 1800, or the DAP, for example, here can also fire at 2200. That's airplanes. Sorry, I was looking at airplanes. This guy can fire at 2200 with its Stinger missiles, as you can see down here. Whereas this guy can only fire back at 1500 meters. So by the time the Apache, which is significantly more expensive with 120 and has significantly better firepower, by the time it gets into range, this thing will have fired 2-3 missiles and just messed it up completely. That's why something like the DAP, with its 30mm rounds, so it's got anti-infantry armament, but it's also got anti-air armament. This helicopter is amazing because it's a good all-rounder and it can defend itself. So we're going to definitely get this helicopter. Obviously, who can walk past the might of the Apache? Like that's a no-brainer. Just because it can mess up tanks, it can mess up infantry, it'll mess everything up. So, Cobras here. They're cheap with 45. They have a lot of rockets which can mess up infantry. So get one of those. So you want to get some of those just because they're cheaper. They're cheap all-rounders pretty much. They can go in, support infantry, destroy infantry, that sort of thing. The Super Cobra anti-radar missiles. Now, they are unique because, for example, as I said before, with the radar-guided missiles and other vehicles, they obviously send out their radar signals. Now, what the anti-radar missiles do, which is kind of obvious when you think about it, they lock onto this radar signature at great range and home in on it and destroy whatever's firing at you. So this thing can actively destroy it can actively destroy anti-air units that use radar, whether that's a ship or a Tunguska or a Vulcan launcher. It can destroy them, which is amazing. And it's also got tow missiles and 20mm rounds, so this is a great all-rounder as well, but it's expensive. Alright, so I think that's it for helicopters. We've got a good all-round set. We've got our DAP, which can act as anti-air. We've got our Apache, which will just screw everything, if you pardon my French. Cobras, which are cheap units, so we can just send in anywhere, like as a sort of fire brigade or like quick response force. And we've got our Super Cobra, which is a more specialized unit that can be deployed to take out vehicle threats with its tow missiles and maybe even anti-air threats with its anti-radar missiles. So now we come to my favorite part, and already there is one of the best, probably one of the best airplanes that was ever conceived. The Warthog, sorry, the Thunderbolt in this case. Now what's important with the aircraft is that you get a nice range of things. So first thing you want to look for is a good anti-air fighter. And the Americans have obviously got the F-14 Tomcat with its Phoenix missiles. They've got the F-15 Eagle with Sparrows and all sorts of things. They've got F-16 Fighting Falcons, which in this case carry cluster bombs. But they've got all sorts of variations. They've even got F-4 Phantoms if you want to go for the more retro look with its just its radar missiles. But so we're gonna have a look through, and already just because I'm a huge Top Gun fan, I'm gonna pick this guy. Now, when it comes to your fighter aircraft, what you want to look for is obviously the range. So in this case, 12,000 meters is a bloody long way away to fire a missile at an enemy aircraft. So, I mean, it's represented in the price, definitely. So I'm going to get one of these. I can only get one of these, unfortunately, which may actually make it worth paying for two of them, just because they're that good. Now, if you don't want to go the route of one expensive plane to do everything, because odds are you're not going to be paying attention, you're going to send it somewhere, it's going to lose its target or whatever, and it's going to be shot down because you don't know where it is, okay? So I'm actually not going to buy this because it's expensive with 155 points, and knowing me, I'm going to get it killed. I really am, because I'm just blind like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two F-16s, right? They are still pretty good with a maximum range of 7,700 meters for firing missiles, which is very nice. Another thing you want to consider, but is not important as much, is the ECM value, which the description says it all. The higher the ECM value, the less chance you have of being hit by missiles. Obviously, the better the aircraft, the better this will be. So yeah, that's it for the fighter craft. So let's not worry about that. Get one with high range, with good missiles, good armament, good ECM, that sort of thing. Now, we all want this guy because he's amazing. So second aircraft you want to look at is obviously a ground attack aircraft. Whether that's now I know you want to talk about the Thunderbolt in this case, but we'll get to that. That's a specific type of aircraft that is probably third on the list here. Second on the list for me is something like a Skyhawk that can drop bombs. Just something that can bomb an area. For example, if there's infantry in a town, just all around a town, and you know they're there but you can't see them, just drop 100 bombs on them and see what happens. For this case, I usually like to use the Intruder because, as you can see, this guy carries a lot of bombs. 12 227 kilograms of pure destruction. So we get some of these. So that's 3 Intruders we have now to just bomb an entire area. You can also get things like an Aardvark, for example, which carries 12 340 kilogram bombs, which is significantly more powerful, but also costs a lot more. So with your ground attack aircraft, like carpet bombers, I'm going to call them, you want a cheaper unit that you can just get early game, where you can just bombard an entire convoy of enemy infantry going somewhere, for example. Now, as I was saying before, the anti-tank aircraft, obviously it's the Thunderbolt. I got to go for the Thunderbolt with its cannon and 6 Maverick missiles. It has a huge range. It has nice accuracy. Accuracy is definitely important with this thing. I mean, it's a no-brainer because we all love this guy. Everyone loves this guy. He's amazing, and yeah, let's not go on about that. Now, as you can see, we've already used up a lot of points, and these guys are not cheap. Once you have about 3 aircraft, it's not cheap. After this, if you have enough points, you can consider, I mean, you can always use a Nighthawk if you want to instead of the Thunderbolt, because the paveway missiles have 0% dispersion, it's 100% accuracy, they will hit anything, and they will destroy it horribly. That's up to you, you guys can vary it as you want, but this is just a basic deck, so we're going to stick to the basics. One thing that's optional, you don't need to have, napalm. It's very specialized, it's anti-infantry. For example, you see an infantry walking through the jungle, Vietnam style, go in there, drop napalm on the jungle, and they're gone. That's just how it works. So if you want a napalm bomber, that's up to you. I don't always run with them in all my decks, but for this case, we are going to do so with an F4 Phantom, just because, look at it, it has so much stuff, and it also has some infrared missiles just in case. Yeah, so we've got 4 points left, so we can go back. You can pick an extra helicopter if you want, you can pick extra vehicles, we can have 2 extra vehicles in this case, which I might actually do. We can have an extra tank, we can have extra support. You know, at this point you can just go back and see for yourself what you want to do. I'll get to Navy in a second. We'll just put another Apache in here because why not, right? So the reason I haven't set any points aside for Navy is because they're all free. Any deck can have a Navy in it. You can have 5 Navy ships, unless you pick the Marine specialty. You can only ever have the 5 ships, but Marine specialties can have more ships. Because as you can see, you can deploy units via boats. So this guy will come in on a landing craft, and you'll land him on the beach somewhere, Iwo Jima style. Okay, maybe not Iwo Jima style, because that sort of ended pretty badly. But, you know, you can do it Normandy style. Let's go with that. So the way I like to do it is I like to get one frigate. I like the Lafayette because it can do a lot of stuff. It has the 100mm cannon for attack and defense. It has anti-ship radar missiles. It has general radar missiles for anti-air. So this thing can do it all. So we're going to grab one of those. Because they can capture things. You can deploy them to just hold an area if you really want to. All the stuff. Now, the Congo is the biggest blue force ship you can get. It's a destroyer. It's huge. It costs a lot of money, but it's usually very worth it because, like you can see here, 96 radar missiles with a range of about 5,000. Yeah, you will mess up things. You know, put this thing somewhere, it'll destroy it. Just point it at something and watch it die. I like to run without naval infantry units just because it gets messy. They take forever to get anywhere, and I just don't like it. So I get my Lafayettes, I got my Congos. That's really all I need in terms of like active ships to do things, like attack ships. What I usually get is an LCU, just because it's a resupply unit. Just like your trucks and helicopters, it'll resupply your ships. It can resupply things on land if they get close enough. It's good to have. So get one of those. Blimey, my throat's drying up. I'm talking too much. So you can get any combination of stuff, however you want to play it, you know. Here, these guys are pretty cool. They're small ships, but they have 105mm mortars with a humongous range. So you can get a lot of these guys and just annihilate something. So I like to get these guys. As you can see, there's 8 of them, so there's a lot, right? But if you don't want this, you can get a Monitor Zippo, for example, which is the same ship, only has a close-range flamethrower and a 40mm cannon, which you can send in somewhere, like down rivers. So these guys are small enough to go down rivers in some maps. And they can attack infantry, they can do all sorts of things. But yeah, we're going to stick with the Monitor for now, just because they're cool to have. And last but not least, the STRB-90, which I love because it can go down rivers, it's cheap, it has a lot of firepower. You've got Hellfire missiles, you've got dual Brownings, you've got 40mm frag grenades. This thing's amazing. And yeah, I think that's about it for Navy. You can also get anti-Navy fighters, anti-Navy anything. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff here. It's really a mix and match thing if you guys want to do it. You know, that's up to you. But yeah, that was the Navy. So I'm just going to go over everything again, just give a quick summary of everything, and yeah, that'll be it, I think. So logistics. For a balanced game, you want one flying command unit to get things quickly, one ground command unit that can just, you know, you deploy at close range. You want an FOB, because you really do need the supplies. I can't stress that enough. Get an FOB, maybe even 2 if you've got high supply demand, like lots of artillery and stuff. Get a ground supply unit to resupply close range, or your own artillery, and get a flying supply unit to get your guys that are out in the field, like your deep range recon, your tanks, whatever. Just resupply the front lines. With your infantry, you want a good balance. You want close range AT, like your normal infantry. You want them to have the best anti-tank capabilities possible without sacrificing other things like their weapons and stuff. If you can, have long range anti-tank, like what I showed you in my last video. Make sure you get one of those because they are very important at defense. They are, I kid you not, you can take down an entire tank platoon with just those guys from about 5 kilometers range. They are amazing. Make sure you've got a good anti-air infantry, an anti-air team, and throw in 1 or 2 special forces with helicopters just because they can be quickly deployed to plug gaps in your defenses, attack the enemy, sneak around behind, do all sorts of shenanigans, and they are good at it. As for your support, make sure you have at least 1 radar missile or radar guided anti-air, because they defend large areas against aircraft. If they're really expensive, make sure to get a cheaper version just so you can quickly plug gaps. You don't need to have a non-radar guided anti-air, just because they're not as good, but they're great against helicopters. They are amazing against helicopters, especially if they work together with your Stinger units, for example, to defend an area that you really want to defend, whether it's just your artillery or something. You know, make sure you get one of those. Artillery, optional, big guns, destroy everything from far away. It's great. Tanks. Now, with tanks, make sure you get 1 really strong tank. If you play an airborne deck, for example, you're not going to focus on tanks, right? But if you have just a balanced deck or an armored deck, make sure you get a really nice tank. For this, the armor is super important. The more armor, the better, even if it doesn't even have a cannon. Like, if it's just, I don't know, a pile of armor on tracks, that's amazing. If it has 100 armor, get it. Just the more armor, the better, is all I'm saying. Maybe get 1 or 2 heavy tanks, and a lot of, I don't want to say rubbish tanks, but a lot of tanks that you can just overwhelm the enemy with, or place strategically in places that are cheap. Not the places are cheap. Get cheap tanks that you can put in places to defend together with your infantry, etc., etc. Recon units are always nice. They are definitely important because you want to see where the enemy's at. Get 1 flying unit for sure. Like, if you only have space for 1 recon unit, get a helicopter because they can see everything, right? Put them on a hilltop, they'll see everything. Vehicles, I don't usually play with vehicles, to be honest. A lot of them are just like anti-tank LAVs, anti-tank Humvees, just cheap units that do a lot of damage to tanks, or in this case, they can support infantry with massive cannons. Alright? Helicopters. If you want to break it down, specialize your helicopters. For example, this one is an all-rounder. The DAP is the all-rounder. The Apache is the guy that comes in, just messes stuff up. He's basically the Terminator. The Cobra, you can buy 3 of these, send them to a village that's currently being attacked, and they'll help defend it. These are support guys. These, again, are your super specialized roles. For example, in this case, anti-radar, just anti-vehicle in general. And then another Apache, because they're Apaches. Like, come on, guys. Like, get with the program. With your aircraft, definitely specialized. Be sure what you want to do with your deck, right? If you lack tanks, get a lot of anti-tank units, because you will want to kill them. Start off with a fighter. What's most important about the fighters is the range of their missiles. The larger the range, the better. The ECM is nice, but not that important. Second, get a plane that can drop a lot of bombs. They don't need to be aimed at anything, just something you can carpet bomb an area with, because infantry will come in, you'll carpet bomb the area just blindly, and they'll take out everything, right? An anti-tank aircraft like the Thunderbolt, probably the most famous anti-tank aircraft of all time, I'd say. Get one of those to destroy tanks. They're very specialized. Don't let them attack infantry or anything. Just go in, kill the tanks, bugger off again. Now, the optional one, napalm. Go in, kill infantry. That's all they do. They just kill infantry, nothing else. If you couple it with the carpet bombers, you can just wipe out everything in a certain radius. Alright? Now, on that note, the napalm bombers don't kill vehicles, but they will stun the vehicles, because a tank that's covered in napalm isn't going anywhere, because that's scary, right? So you can stun vehicles in order for your thunderbolts or intruders to get there, or whatever you want to do, right? Navy, you play Navy however you want. If you want to land Normandy style, get some of the infantry, some of the tanks, whatever you want. I like to run it just Navy, stays Navy style. Get some medium-sized ships that you can pump a few out of to just hold an area while you wait for your super huge super huge destroyer to go in and just cover an area with death. Supply units with artillery ships. Like Red 4 has rocket artillery, you guys have mortar artillery. If you don't want to run that route, that's fine, but I like to run it because it's nice to just be able to bombard things without threat of being shot to hell by something on the ground. And a patrol boat, just because it can go down the rivers, support your infantry, attack supply routes of the enemy, all sorts with its massive firepower. That's pretty much all there is to talk about when it comes to building decks. I hope you guys learnt something, and I'll try and make more tutorial videos. It would be amazing if you guys subscribed, gave me ideas of what I can do, because I'd love to help you guys out with this, because I love this game, and I'd love to have people to play it with. If you guys want to play this game with me, by all means hit me up, leave a comment or whatever, like this video, share it with your friends, please, get them into the game, who knows. It goes on sale very often on Steam, so it's definitely worth a look. You don't need DLC for anything, because it just adds extra units. But I've been talking too much. But yeah, I've been the Depressed Panda. I hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you guys.